He's like one of the like more f***ed up older guys that's just like goofy. Doesn't have his shit together. Anyway, you guys want to record a podcast?
Yes, please.
Yeah, let's probably just
All right, let's do that.
No, let's talk about Heat for another half hour.
All
okay.
right.
So
All right.
No,
I remember-
don't.
So Pacino.
Oh, that
Let's
was
talk about his different eras.
No,
Yeah.
I don't wanna.
Welcome to I'd Buy That for $1, a podcast about inexpensive, common, and underappreciated records that are waiting to be rediscovered. I'm your host, Sean Hartman, and here's a hot podcasting tip for you. If it doesn't come naturally, leave it, take a breath, and say it again.
Ooh.
Didn't know we were a life coach podcast now.
We do it all.
I'm co-host Jeremy. For my title this week, I was like, I'm going to look up what year I am and see if Al Stewart's my enemy or if, maybe we're supposed to get married or something. And I look it up. Peter informs me it's based on the Vietnamese years, not, Chinese zodiac that I think is maybe more known in America, but I found out I'm the year of the cat.
Whoa.
Whoa, it's you.
Yes.
This is your album. This is your year.
Yeah. I'm so vain. This album is probably about me.
Yeah, I think so.
You can come back to that in some way when we feature a Carly Simon album too.
Yes.
I am co-host Peter Cook, and Sean, Jeremy, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful podcast.
Okay, I like that. Let's do it.
I wouldn't call this a beginning.
This episode.
Okay. Because we've been doing this podcast for a little while.
Yeah, I mean, throw that all out the window, though. That was like the intro. We were just kind of building up steam, trying out a few things. Podcast starts now.
Right here, right now.
Yeah.
If people haven't figured it out already, we're talking about the album Year of the Cat by Al Stewart from the year 1976, released in the United States on Janus Records. How about we just get into a song before we go any further, guys?
You know what? That sounds great.
Yeah, let's get into a song before we go any further, guys.
That seems familiar. Is there an echo in here? I had selected, rather than starting with the title track that people are most likely familiar with, I thought we'd go with a deep cut. I thought we'd start with Flying Sorcery, Side B, Track 1.
With your photographs of Kitty Hawk and the biplanes on your wall, you were always Amy Johnson from the time that you were small. No schoolroom kept you grounded while your thoughts could get away. You were taking off in tiger moths, your wings against the brushstrokes of the day. Are you there? On the tarmac with the winter in your hair, by the empty hangar doors you stop and stare. Leave the oil drums behind you, they won't care. Oh, are you there? Oh, you wrapped me up in a leather coat and you took me for a ride. We were drifting with the tailwind when the runway came in sight. The clouds came up to gather us and the cockpit turned to white. When I looked, the sky was empty. I suppose you never saw the landing lights. Are you there? In your jacket with the grease stain and the tear, caught up in the slipstream of the dam. The compass roads will guide you anywhere. Oh, are you there?
This is an album where you really want to pay attention to the lyrics. I know not everyone is a lyric listener, but that seems to be Al Stewart's main focus. And that one mentions the Wright brothers' historic 1903 flight at Kitty Hawk, as well as Amy Johnson, an English pioneer pilot who was the first woman to fly solo from London to Australia. Stewart himself, Al Stewart, said, "It seems to be about airplanes losing each other in a fog bank. In fact, it's about lovers who, for whatever reason, part." So it's a metaphor. The original title of the song was A Perfect Immelmann Turn, which is a maneuver named after its inventor, the World War I German fighter ace Max Immelmann. And Stewart had come across the phrase in a book and found it compelling. But as we'll learn, ultimately he went with a different title and probably slightly different lyrics. He really worked hard on his themes and lyrics to his songs.
Yeah, I imagine the record labels had to reel him in pretty often.
With how ambitious he is lyrically.
Yeah, and how kind of obscure and out there it seems like he's able to get. Even like reeled in, he references a lot of obscure history moments, I noticed. But he, man, yeah, his imagery in that song and other songs on this album is impeccable.
Yeah, literate is a good word.
Yeah, and he builds like pictures that you can like see.
Yeah, it's very vivid. Were either of you at all familiar with this album, or at least the big hit song, prior to me suggesting we feature this?
I was only familiar with Time Passages.
Oh, a song from a different album.
Yeah, and that's kind of it. In my mind, Al Stewart was kind of like a corny soft rock guy, and I hadn't given him a chance. And listening to this, I was like, you know, the music is gentle, but like his lyrics are no joke. He's legit in that realm.
Yeah, this fits into our ongoing loose theme of 70s soft rock takeover for this season, but it's different.
It sure does.
But it's a little different flavor from, I think, any other record we've talked about this season in that regard. Sean, how about you?
Not very familiar. Obviously, I've seen this record a million times, bought and sold it, but I just had like an impression that it wasn't for me. I feel like at some point I listened to it and didn't like it. Probably was a long time ago. I also am not a big fan of the artwork, and I think the artwork was kind of a turnoff for me. The cartoonishness of it seemed just a little goofy, and nothing about it was like, this is an album that I'm going to like. So, I'm all about reevaluating stuff where I've just been disliking it mostly on the artwork, because I'm often wrong. Those deep-seated prejudices that I have against some albums.
As Herbie Mann Push taught you.
Yes.
Did you see what design team was behind this album cover?
It's another Hypnosis John, correct?
It is. It is. You are correct. Who I know the Godly and Cream album, the Freeze Frame album, was a Hypnosis John, as you said.
Yeah, we featured their artwork a number of times. I mean, they've done just so many iconic album covers over the years.
Yeah, obviously at the top of that pile would be Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon. Not that we covered that album, but the one that people would know best.
Yeah, people might have heard of that album.
I grew up with the title track from this. My mom really likes that song. And I remember she had a cassette, and I'm not positive whether it was this album or if it was like a collection. I don't remember hearing most of these other songs much, but they all sound a little bit familiar to me. I've had this album for a few years. I was gifted it, and I've listened a handful of times, but I thought it would be a fun one to dive into more. And it's supposed to be a real state-of-the-art production. Like, this is one that people would test on the hi-fi to demonstrate speakers.
I could see that.
Yeah. Impeccable production.
Yeah.
And I've been enjoying it. This probably isn't for everyone, this album. He has I would say his voice is an acquired taste. I think he himself, Al Stewart, is aware of that, as we'll discuss more. But he sure makes up for it in the lyrical department. And the arrangements are good too.
Yeah, it was musically more interesting than I expected, based on my stereotype in my mind of what he was like.
I actually realized who he reminds me of while listening to this a lot the last few days, and that would be Robin Hitchcock.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Huh.
Of course, Robin Hitchcock is coming from a little more of a punky side than I think Al Stewart would have been.
Yeah, I love Robin Hitchcock. I guess now that you're saying that, I could see that lyrically.
Even lyrically, too, vocally and lyrically.
Yeah. Yeah, I noticed a few times when Al gets spirited, he kind of sounds like Bowie a little bit.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I found that interesting.
Well, I thought we could just learn a little bit about him before we get into the next selection. Get started now?
Makes sense.
You guys into that?
Yeah.
Alistair Ian Stewart was born September 5th, 1945, making him 1 year to the day older than Freddie Mercury. He was born in Scotland, but grew up in southwest England near Bournemouth. He was raised by his mother because his father, who was in the Royal Air Force Volunteer Reserve, died in a plane crash during a 1945 training exercise before Al was born.
That explains a lot of World War II references.
Yeah, that could account for that. Rock and roll came along as he was entering adolescence. Dwayne Eddy inspired him to pick up the guitar. And he was an early head. He was obsessed with the details of every rock and roll record released in the UK, memorizing the writer, the producer, as well as the catalog number for each single. He also became really good at predicting which records would be hits and would try to tell his local record store which singles they needed to stock up on, but they never listened to him. As this young teenager, he said he was usually right. He played in several rock and roll bands around Bournemouth as a teenager, and the scene around him was thriving. Manfred Mann was a fixture of that scene early on. Al Stewart knew Andy Summers, later guitarist of The Police, Lee Kerslake, later drummer of Uriah Heep, and Greg Lake, later, of course, of King Crimson and Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Al Stewart took 10 guitar lessons from Robert Fripp.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But Al was discouraged when he listened back to recordings of himself to realize that he wasn't much of a singer. And he didn't really think he was that great of a guitar player either. And he felt discouraged, but then along came Bob Dylan. And once Al Stewart heard Bob Dylan, he realized he didn't have to be a traditionally great singer if he had strong lyrics. And at that point, he abandoned rock, moved to London. He was 19 years old, and he became a fixture on the folk scene there. He performed mostly cover songs initially, and made a chance connection when he started sharing a London flat with a young American musician named Paul Simon. And Al Stewart would listen to Paul Simon writing songs through the wall in the apartment, and then whenever he finished a song, Simon needed someone to play it for, and Stewart would be there. And so he would be the first to hear a lot of these finished songs. He remembers hearing Homeward Bound and Richard Cory before anyone else. just hearing this whole process inspired him, and he decided he should start writing songs as well. And Paul Simon left when the remixed single version of his song he had recorded back in the US, The Sound of Silence, arrived in the mail one day, and Paul Simon was appalled by the electric instruments and drums that had been overdubbed onto his acoustic folk song that he had recorded with Art Garfunkel the year before, but he found out that it had become a hit and returned to America.
Wow.
And then what?
Then he wrote a song called You Can Call Me Al.
Oh.
About 20 years later. That was the next thing that happened in Paul Simon's career.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm glad we could wrap that up nicely.
Yeah.
And I assume is Al Stewart related, right?
Oh, yeah, to call me Al. Oh, that's pretty good, Jeremy.
Yeah.
Al Stewart began serving as master of ceremonies at the club Les Cousins. It was a folk club, playing alongside artists like Bert Jansch, Cat Stevens, Van Morrison, and Roy Harper. And meanwhile, his professional recording career began with an appearance playing some guitar on Jackson C. Frank's self-titled debut album produced by Paul Simon in 1965. And the following year, Al Stewart released a single on Decca Records of an original song on the A-side and a Yardbirds cover on the B-side. He then signed with CBS Records, which is the UK division of Columbia. And his debut album, Bedsetter Images, was released in 1967. His second album, Love Chronicles, released in 1969, featured Fairport Convention as the backing band. They were under pseudonyms in the liner notes. And on one song, he had half of Led Zeppelin backing him. By 1972, he had released a total of 4 albums with critical acclaim, but not much commercial success. And he wasn't particularly satisfied with anything he had released up to this point. He decided to take his other love, aside from music, that being history, and start working that into his songs. So on his 1973 album, Past, Present, and Future, each song represented a different decade in the 20th century. And that album immediately outsold his first 4 albums combined, and it also got a proper U.S. release through Janus Records. Prior to this, they had just been released in the UK. It reached number 133 on the Billboard Rock Album charts and received a lot of play on college radio stations. Al Stewart would say that at this point, he viewed his first 4 albums as an apprenticeship and the 5th one as a thesis statement. So the next song we're going to feature is a good example of this approach to writing, incorporating history. And that is the opening song on the album, Lord Grenville, Side A, Track 1.
Go and tell Lord Grenville that the tide is on the turn. It's time to haul the anchor up and leave the land astern. We'll be gone before the dawn returns, like voices on the wind. Go and tell Lord Grenville that our dreams have run aground. There's nothing here to keep us in this shanty town. None of us are caring where we're bound, like voices on the wind. And come the day you'll hear them saying they're throwing it all away. Nothing more to say, just throwing it all away. Go and fetch the captain's log and tear the pages out. We're on our way to nowhere now, can't bring the helm about. None of us are left in any doubt, we won't be back again. Send a message to the fleet, they'll search for us in vain. We won't be there.
Yeah, the story of the song really drags you into it. That's what I kept noticing with this. If you give the lyrics your attention, he'll pull you in. If you're just kind of like listening half-heartedly in the background, I feel like it just kind of fades into the background. It doesn't grab you. But yeah, he's a master narrative teller as well as kind of building imagery with his lyrics. So I thought that was cool because normally when I hear history things in songs, I kind of cringe unless it's serving like a direct metaphor pretty obviously.
Yeah, he makes it work. That one is about Sir Richard Grenville, an English explorer who sailed to Roanoke Island in what is now North Carolina in 1586 to fortify a colony established by Sir Walter Raleigh. And he left behind 15 men who disappeared, and Roanoke became known as a lost colony. So the song is written from the perspective of the 15 men who were left behind and know their end is imminent.
You can definitely hear the David Bowie comparisons on that track as well, especially Space Oddity era.
Yeah, definitely. So after the success of Past, Present, and Future, Al's next album was Modern Times, which was lighter on historical references, stuck more to storytelling in the songwriting, just more general storytelling. It made the top 30 in the U.S. album charts and was his first to be produced by Alan Parsons. We'll talk a little bit more about Alan Parsons in a moment, but Al Stewart on the Modern Times tour landed a spot opening for Linda Ronstadt on a North American tour. And during a sound check at Cincinnati, Ohio, he noticed the keyboardist in his band, Peter Wood, playing a really striking and catchy line, a really pretty melody line. And after hearing it, he asked if he could write words to the notes that Peter Wood was playing, and Wood said sure, and Wood was given a co-writing credit on the song. Originally, when Al Stewart put together the lyrics for the song, he called it Foot of the Stage, and it was about the late British comedian Tony Hancock. When he sent it, he was trying to break through to the American market at this point, and when he sent it to the American record company Janus, they told him they had never heard of Tony Hancock, but loved the music and asked if he could write it about something else. And it just so happened that Al Stewart's girlfriend at the time had a book of Vietnamese astrology, and it was open to a chapter in there called The Year of the Cat. And he saw that and thought, well, that's a song title. And he was one of those people always on the hunt for a song title. And he then saw Casablanca on television and started to write lyrics in the second person about a love affair with allusions to the classic film Casablanca. So he set it in Morocco in 1975, the Year of the Cat. Al Stewart felt that it was too long and too cumbersome to have any commercial potential, so he put it at the end of the album. Then when he was in America promoting the record, he was driving down Sunset Boulevard and Year of the Cat came on the radio. After it was over, he changed the station, and only to hear it on another station. And he realized, oh, this is a hit in the United States, and he decided right then and there to move to Los Angeles. That song was never a hit in the UK, and he decided that was a sign that he needed to move to America. And it was a big hit. It hit number 8 on the US Billboard Hot 100. And for those not familiar, I think we should go ahead and play Year of the Cat at this point. We'll say before we do that for a radio hit, this has some incredibly long instrumental passages in it. The song is just over 6.5 minutes long, and I think somewhere in the area of 4 minutes are instrumental. So we're going to dive in right when he gets to the first verse. So this is Year of the Cat, Side B, track 4.
got movie in a country where they turn back time. You go strolling through the crowd like Peter Lorre contemplating a crime. She comes out of the sun in a silk dress, running like a watercolor in the rain. Don't bother asking for explanation, she'll just tell you that she came in the year of the cat. She doesn't give you time for questions as she locks up your arm in hers, and you follow till your sense of which direction completely disappears. By the blue tiled walls near the market stalls, there's a hidden door she leads you to. These days, she says, I feel my life just like a river running through the year of the cat. While she looks at you so coolly, and her eyes shine like the moon in the sea. She comes in incense and patchouli, so you take her to find what's waiting inside the year of the cat.
That's a mega hit right there.
Doesn't sound like a mega hit to me. But
It's one of those oddities that I could see why he didn't think it had commercial potential either. Something about it must have just the tone of it. I think it's got that more haunting minor key melody to it, which, funny enough, a lot of this album does have that, and most of the songs that I opted to feature for this episode are a little more peppy major key sounding, and I just figured Year of the Cat can sort of take care of that aspect of his songwriting.
Yeah.
for the purpose of giving people a taste of what Al Stewart sounds like.
His vocals are very soothing, I must say. Like, it's a unique vocal approach, but they just kind of seem to float over top of the music in a very pleasant manner, even on the kind of darker songs like this.
that's the part I haven't fully been won over on, to be honest. The vocals are like too gentle to me. Like I want them to be like telling the story rather than like reading the story, but it's not his style.
There were apparently some instances where Alan Parsons had to make him do takes over and over and over to hit the right notes, in some cases for 2 hours, because they were going for perfection, and that wasn't necessarily, singing just wasn't Al's wheelhouse. Apparently, his style of songwriting is unique too, and how he constructs the songs. He tends to write the music and even go as far as getting the orchestration written and often completely recorded before he even has any lyrics, or maybe he has the melody in mind. I don't know. Wasn't clear on that, but usually in most cases, he said he would write as many as 4 different sets of lyrics to see what works best with the music on a particular track.
Yeah, I saw that. That was wild to me. That's so much work. As someone who tries to write songs, like that's overwhelming in my mind to write 4 versions of each song you're doing. But I also read some of his thoughts on songwriting and found myself very aligned. I think it's been mentioned in past episodes that I don't like Love You Baby lyrics that are like generic kind of thing, and I saw this quote from him where he says, "So if I have two little rules and guiding principles, they would be, 1, don't use words that other people use. Very few people would put the word, pterodactyl into a song. So that's fine. No O's, no babies, no I miss you so's, and no you done me wrong, no bad, no sad. Number 2, the other thing is, write about subjects that no one else writes about. Basically 90% of all songs seem to be either Baby I Love You So or Baby You've Done Me Wrong." I was fist pumping while I read that.
Yeah, that seems to be the Jeremy Ruggles mission statement right there.
Yeah, he already wrote it for me.
I did think in selecting this that lyrically you would be able to appreciate it. So I'm glad to hear that, and that you looked into his philosophy behind it.
Yeah.
So in the United Kingdom, this was Al Stewart's first release on RCA after his contract with CBS Records had expired. It was still on Janus in the United States, and it was recorded at Abbey Road Studios in 1976, where the producer Alan Parsons had first worked at the age of 19 as an assistant under George Martin on 2 Beatles albums. He was also engineer on Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon, once again, an album people may have heard of. That was also recorded at Abbey Road. When Alan Parsons and Al Stewart met, Parsons told him that he was trying to get into production work. As previously mentioned, they had worked together on Al Stewart's previous album, Modern Times. This was their second one together. The orchestral arranger was Andrew Powell. The bassist, George Ford, and the drummer, Stuart Elliott, had played together in the glam rock band Steve Harley and Cockney Rebel. That's the name of the band. Stuart Elliott would soon become Kate Bush's preferred drummer, playing on her first 5 albums and hits like Wuthering Heights, Babushka, Running Up the Hill, Hounds of Love, and Cloud Busting, just to name a few big ones. Keyboardist Peter Wood, the one who co-wrote Year of the Cat, he has worked with Cyndi Lauper, Bob Dylan, Lou Reed, and Joan Armatrading. He was on the Joan Armatrading album that we talked about a few years ago. Guitarist Tim Rennick has played with Elton John, Pink Floyd, and Eric Clapton, among others. So that's just a few of the people involved in making the very smooth sounds on this record.
Yeah, I can see why it's a production feat with ace players.
Yeah, and this was right around the time that Alan Parsons was getting the Alan Parsons Project started. So I believe they only did one more album together before Alan Parsons became very consumed in his own solo work. Al Stewart's popularity waned in the 1980s, but he has continued to record and tour. His most recent studio album was Sparks of Ancient Light in 2008, and he released his third live album, Uncorked, in 2009. He's touring the United States right now through the summer, so if you like this and you want to go see Al do it up live, and you live in the U.S., he might be coming to a town near you. Look it up. I'm not going to read off all the tour dates.
Telling you we sent you, and he'll know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. The I'd Buy That Boys sent me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can go to the ticket windows and just drop our names, and you'll get free tickets.
That's a promise.
Yeah.
And that's all I really have on Al Stewart. So, Sean, I know you weren't really familiar with this album, but it's possible that you were able to think of a few recommended similar albums written about zodiac signs.
It's possible. Yeah. I intend to pick up a copy of this record for myself soon and spend some time with it. I think there's something here. I'm interested. And here are the first 3 albums that we have previously featured that in some small way, listening to this reminded me of. The first one, especially similar with the unique vocal approach, Buzzy Linhart's Pussycats Can Go Far from 1974.
Yeah, there's one I haven't thought about in a while, but that is a good comparison.
Yeah, a good classic episode to go back and listen to. Another one that I thought was maybe just a little bit more of a stretch, but at times on here, I thought I heard just a little bit of Beatles influence, which made me think of the episode we did on Emmett Rhodes' Self-Titled from 1970.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You've said two that were not the one that I immediately thought of our previous episodes, but
You want me to name the third, and then you can see if I thought of it at all?
yeah,
Okay.
I'm excited now, but you did well in the first two. They just weren't what I expected.
Okay, all right. Well, here's the third one. Carole King, Wrap Around Joy, 1974.
That wasn't the one I thought of.
Okay, what was it?
Dirk Hamilton. You can
yeah.
sing on the left or bark on the right.
Yes, that's a very good comparison.
Yeah, that very unique acquired taste singing voice.
Yep, with great lyricism. Some pretty legit playing on it. So, yeah.
Going back to you recognizing some influence from the Beatles, Al Stewart did have a good anecdote about going to a Beatles concert in his hometown as a youngster. He's like, I don't know, between 16 and 18 years old at the time. And a friend of his went to the manager of the club and posed as representatives from Rickenbacker Guitars. And, you know, with all the pandemonium of Beatlemania going on around, they were just like, oh, we'll get you right into, you know, like, we have to talk to the Beatles about a sponsorship, or we have some gear for them or something. And so they just put him right backstage with John Lennon, and they got to talk to John Lennon for like 5 or 10 minutes.
Whoa.
Nice.
He got to hold his guitar, and he realized that it was all a ruse, but he was into it, as you can imagine. So,
Wow. I wonder how long they tried to keep up the ruse, or if they just dropped it right away. Like if they actually pretended to be
the jig was up by the time they got in the door, and Lennon was like, basically like, oh no, let them stay. Like, this is okay. They were basically the same age as their classmates were watching them. Like, basically the crowd was being parted. The sea was being parted for them to go through, and they're seeing their classmates just baffled as to why they're being allowed to go backstage. So yeah, he tells a lot of good. He's like a classic storyteller, songwriter too. Like he'd probably be good for like a storytelling VH1 session, like little anecdotes about things behind the songs or experiences that he's had. He's met some people. Apparently, I don't know the details behind this, but apparently he was acquainted or knew Yoko Ono before she even met John Lennon.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't fully know how that happened, but it was something I saw mentioned.
Wow, so he was into Yoko and Paul Simon before they were big.
Yeah. He's like the Forrest Gump of, you know.
Year of the Shrimp.
Yeah, exactly. Well, very good. I think on that note, we can introduce the final selection and get out of here. We should mention, of course, you can always get more content, including bonus episodes, mixes, and even a vinyl subscription where we will send records right to your door along with a handwritten note. If you go over to patreon.com/I'd buy that podcast and sign up today. Help us keep the lights on over here. So once again, that's patreon.com/I'd buy that podcast. Thank you for listening. The final selection. I was really torn on this one. I was very tempted to feature the one that Sean referenced in the intro. If it doesn't come naturally, leave it. As that one really has kind of a Bruce Springsteen feel to it, which I thought was a different angle to Al Stewart. But the one that I ended up landing on kind of does too. Sand in Your Shoes. He said it was his attempt at writing a folk rock song like Bob Dylan, and I think it gets a little bit like The Boss too. So that's what I thought we would get out of here on Sand in Your Shoes. Is there anything else to say, fellas?
I got nothing.
Sean?
Nothing.
Nothing. Just got some sand in your shoes.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for listening to I'd Buy That for $1. My name is Peter Cook.
My name is Jeremy Ruggles.
And I'm Sean Hartman.
Sand in Your Shoes, Side A, Track 4.
Track 4.
Track 4.
You always were a city kid, though you were country raised. And back in some forgotten time we shared the cold north days. But the simple life was not your style, and you just had to escape. So it's goodbye to my lady of the islands. On Remembrance Day, the bands all played, the bells pealed through the park, and you lay there by the do not signs and shamed them with your spark. Now winter moans in old men's bones as the day falls into dark. And it's goodbye to my lady of the island.